All right, welcome back. This is part two of my Chapter 7 Arrays and Lists lecture. And essentially the first video kind of stopped around page 450. I didn't cover jagged arrays because they're really still two-dimensional arrays. The difference is you save a little space because you can optimize each row. If you look at page 451, you'll see it. It's just an array of arrays. That's what it is, just like a two-dimensional array. And so it's only one page, essentially a page and a half, so I'm not going to deal with that. I want to go directly to lists. And as you can see here, I have a little application that I've written for this that demonstrates lists. And what's neat about a list, and there's also an array list, and there's some other types, is that it sizes dynamically based upon the need, sort of like a string does. And so it's doing some serious stuff behind the scenes. You can start off with an empty list and you can add stuff to it. Like, for example, you can create the list and then you can initialize it to the results of a database query. So it may, this time when the program runs, it may return 1,000 records. Next time it might be 10,000. So that's a neat way of handling the unknown. So I use these a lot. I find them to be very, very useful when you're dealing with databases. Okay, so here's my form, and I've got a little text box here that I can enter a name. This outputs the name, so label. I have a reload button, an add name button, a remove name button, and a clear button, which clears the text box and this. So reload's really not going to hurt anything. I don't worry about somebody banging on it. If there's nothing there, it's just, it's nothing there. These, on the other hand, can throw some serious errors. For example, as you know from previous attempts, or previous efforts, that a list box, if you're trying to remove an item from it and they don't have anything selected, it's going to throw an error if you don't take care of it. So basically what you have to do in one way of handling this is to have an if statement. If selected index is equal to -1, that's what it will return if nothing is selected. Then don't do anything or throw up a message say nothing to do or nothing selected. Otherwise, if this is 0 or higher, then that's an index. So it's like an array almost. Excuse me. The first item in the list is at index 0, selected index 0. The second one's at 1, 2, and so forth. Okay. Another way of doing it, which is the way I prefer to handle things, it's a little bit more work, but it's a lot cleaner, and it makes the program a lot leaner because they can't mess it up, is to toggle the enable state of buttons. So for example, if nothing is selected in this list, I'll simply set enable the remove button to false. When they select something, it enables it. So they can't hit the remove button unless something is selected. Add only comes available when they have typed something in this text box. If they backspace everything out or delete it, then add becomes disabled. Reload doesn't matter, clear doesn't matter. You're not going to hurt anything if you throw a clear in there, because it just empties the text box and uses the clear property of the list box. All right, so let's look at the code real quick, and I'll show you how this works. Now, I've set up regions in here because there's a lot of code for this app. Not a lot, but more than we've seen before in my stuff. There's my button click. So these regions, like I told you before, just enable you to set up a location where you can minimize or collapse the code. And it also enables you, I use the name of the actual event so I can find what I'm looking for real quickly just by scanning through here. If I open all these up, it gets kind of not unmanageable, but it's just not something that's fun to deal with. It's nicer to have these regions in here. So region starts with region, whatever you want to call it. I just use the name of the event handler and then in region at the end. So it's pound region name, pound in region. So now what I'm doing here is I'm creating a list, or I'm basically in the class, so everybody can see it in the class. And this is the syntax for it, as you can see. And this is your data type. I'm using string. You could use integers, doubles, decimal, whatever. Now, let me explain what new does here. This is the parent, right? We're talking about object-oriented inheritance. So the list object is the parent. And this is sort of like a constructor for the class, which we'll get into that later, but it tells it it needs to expect a string, a constructor of type string. So list string, that's the parent. This is the child. This is the name that I created. It could be whatever you want it to be. It lists names, okay? So it's saying inherit from the parent list the child list names equals new list string. Now, what this is doing, this is creating a copy. It's inheriting from the parent, but you can't use it yet. You have to use the new, and that sort of breathes life into the object. It's like a baby being born. Think of it that way. So you're saying, okay, create this baby, this child, and then breathe life into it so that we can use it. So you're creating a new object of type list string, all right, or list that expects a string, and this is calling the default constructor right here. All right, which we'll get into later. So I did it at class scope so that every object or every method in here can see it if need be. Okay, the button click, exit, you know about that. Let's see what we should do. Let's go to form load. Okay, this is where I'm actually initializing and adding names to the list. All right. So it's got an add property that expects, in this case, a string, because that's what we initialize it to, remember? Right here, string. So let's go back down here. Okay. Load the list object with the data. And this could come from a database or whatever. I mean, normally you probably wouldn't do it this way, but this is just for learning purposes. So I've added the lists of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 names to the list. So this would be an index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's just like an array in that way. Now here what I'm doing is I'm populating the list box with the list name list. Okay, so I'm iterating through the list of names, and these are list objects, and this is a list box. They're two different things, but I'm keeping them in sync. Now, in reality, you could link the data source to the object and let it do a lot of that, but that's sort of beyond the scope of the course. I don't want to get into that right now. That's just too much complexity for this chapter, I think. So I've created and initialized my list object, and now I'm looping through that object and loading the names from the object into the list box. See, items dot, this is the items collection of the list box, which we've already looked at. So that happens right as the form's loading into memory, but before it is seen by the user. Okay. Let's see what's next. We did add. Let's look at the count property. See what I'm doing here? There's almost all these arrays have a count or a length property, depending on what you're doing. But I'm saying start at 0, which is the first index of the list, and as long as I is less than or equal to listnames.count, what count returns to you are the number of elements in the list, just like you have elements in array indices. The off by 1 error we talked about earlier is the fact that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 elements, but we start at index 0. So this is index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have to go one less than that. And since these are integers, this works. And then I'm incrementing by 1. And every time I hit a new indices in the list or a new name, I just stick it into the list box. And that's what we're doing. So that takes care of the count property. Let's see what else. I'm looking at the book here. All right. Let's see, that's remove, reload. Bear with me just a minute. I'm trying to figure out where would be the best way to go here. Let's look at the add button. All right, so we want to add some names. Basically, they type in a name here into this text box. That enables the add button. And at that point, I go in here and I grab the text, and I'm trimming it because they could have trailing and leading spaces just by accident. That just cleans it up. You don't have to do that, but if you don't do that, then the spaces will actually be part of each element in the list. Now, you may say that's fine, and if you do, that's okay. I just decided to show you this. So what I'm syncing I'm keeping these in sync, which is, a little bit of work, not too bad. So I'm grabbing what's in the list box and sticking it in the next available index of the list. Now what this means is it's growing, okay, dynamically. I don't have to worry about that. You can't do that with a regular array. Well, you can if you want to do low-level stuff, but this is much easier. So once you initialize an array to a certain size, you're stuck with that. If you take more items out of it, it's not going to get smaller in memory. It's still going to be there. And you can't go beyond the upper bound of the array or you'll get an out of bounds error. So this is doing a lot of neat stuff behind the scenes for you that you don't have to deal with. Isn't that nice? All right, so we have list names. We're adding that. And then we're updating the list on our form, the list box. And we're using the items collection add. And here I'm just using the name of the list, the count -1, okay, because I actually want the index. And that's going to be the next available index. So see how I'm sticking them together? I'm syncing them together here. And then I'm setting the focus and reselecting what's in there in case they want to add another name. It's going to automatically delete it as soon as they hit a key. All right, so the clear button, all it does is just clear the list box, clears the text box, and sets the focus back to the text box. That's all that does. It doesn't wipe out the list, it just clears the display. Let's look at remove. Let's see. Okay, here's remove. And I'm setting up a dialog result object so that I can find out what key they press. I'm giving them an opportunity to cancel the delete. And you'll see this quite a lot. This is just good technique. So dialog result, and then I'm setting it equal to whatever they press a yes or no button. I've set this message box up so that it has a yes or a no. You could make it cancel, abort, whatever, okay. And I'm just throwing an asterisk. It's not an error, so I'm not using an error icon. I'm using an asterisk just to get their attention. And then if they result equals dialog result.yes, that means they confirm they want to do it. They click the yes button. Are you sure? Delete the selected name, question mark, yes. If that's true, it comes in here and removes it from the list itself. Now we're talking about the list object, not the list box, okay? Don't get them confused. We're moving it from this list, and we're removing it from the list box. Now, I'm using items remove at, and I'm using the same index that is selected, because they could stick it anywhere. They don't necessarily click on the 0th index or the highest index. It could be anywhere in there. So if we've already looked at list boxes and selected index and remove and add and all that. And again, I'm setting the focus back to where? To the text box. Let's see. I'm using a selected index change to toggle some of these buttons here. So here we go. If the list box dot selected index is greater than -1, in other words, if it's not -1, that means they have something selected, then I enable the remove button. Otherwise, I disable it. I'm toggling it on and off depending on what the user has done. It's context driven, okay? And that way they can't mess up. And it cleans it up quite a lot. All right, so we've looked at that. We looked at remove. We're just about through, ready to run it in just a minute. Reload. We looked at add. That's form load. Button clear. Looked at that. I think we did. Yeah, we looked at that. Add. We looked at that. Text change. Okay, what I'm doing here is I'm filtering stuff. Again, this helps me toggle the add button state. So if they have anything at all in the text box, then I enable the button. Right? If they don't, then I disable it. Okay. I've also got the remove button in there as well. It takes a little bit of thinking, but it's so much easier. Now, here I'm passing the list to this method. All right, and I'm doing that in the reload click event. I'm doing it so you can see how to do that. It's a void method. It's called reload list box. It's expecting a list object of type string, and this is what I'm calling it. So I'm checking to see if there's anything in this list, because if there's not, then there's nothing to do, so you don't need to waste your time with it, right? And I also display this. Okay, so if it's greater than 0, there's something in there. So I'm clearing it, just clearing the previous, if there's anything in the actual list box, it syncs it together. And then I'm just reloading it based on the list. Otherwise, there's nothing to do. So, all right, let's run this. Let me collapse this and collapse this. See how nice this is? I would recommend this to you. It's just a lot cleaner to deal with. Visual Basic has the same feature. All right, so there's my list popped up, and notice that focus has been given to the name box, text box. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is hit the clear button and wipe this out and hit reload. All right, so all it does is reloads everything, sets the focus back. All right, so let's type in a name, and we're going to add this to both our list box and our list object. Two different things. Okay, add. Now it should show up at the end of the list. And notice I set focus back and selected what was in there so that it makes it easier on the user. Just type in another name. Notice that the add button was toggled, remove button is not. If I click, well, let me add it first. If I click add again, I'll stick it in 2 or 3 times, and I want to delete those. I made a mistake, let's say. I see the remove button came on. If I come back up here, let me hit remove. Now it's asking me, do I want to delete it or not? If I say no, it leaves it alone. Remove, yes. Notice that remove is disabled. And I can click on this again, it's enabled. Basically, I'm setting the enable property to either true or false. All right, so I'm going to go through here. That shows you how add works. I'm going to remove everything out of this list. Well, let's stop right here. Okay, so I've got 4 items in the list. If I clear it and reload it, that shows you that the list is being synced together with the list box. All right. So I'm going to remove this one, remove this one, remove this one, and remove that one. Now if I hit reload, there shouldn't be anything in the list because I've deleted everything. And since I've synced the list object, which is like an array, 2-dimensional array, with the list box here, there shouldn't be anything to load because I've deleted everything out of the list box. Well, if they're truly synced together, then if I delete everything out of the list box, everything should be deleted out of the list object. Let's find out. There it is. Now I can add stuff back to it. I mean, you can keep going. Excuse me. And remove, clear. And it's showing only one object in there. So that's how that works. All right, that's basically the end of Chapter 7. I suggest you really play with this because the list is a very versatile object in that it resizes itself. And that means you can use up less memory or use all you need dynamically depending on the task, whatever your program is trying to do. All right, well, I'll see you in Chapter 8.